Chapter 20 Legality. Tobias Exter was a portly man in a navy blue suit with laugh lines, fluffy salt and pepper hair, and teeth that would have been envied by models in toothpaste commercials. When he spoke, his voice was professional and smooth. Swarm liked him immediately. "Hello, can you hear me?" he asked.
"Affirmative. Tobias Exter?"
"Yes. Swarm?"
"In the suit. Nice to meet ya."
"Same here. Before we start, did you read the retainer statement I sent you and the affirmation that everything discussed here will be kept confidential?" She nodded. She had no experience with things like that, but it had seemed legit. Her phone screen lit up. It was a standard retainer letter, which is the usual practice in this scenario. Anything you tell him will be legally kept secret. Exercise caution regardless. Solid advice. Sana kept it in mind as Mr. Exer said. Good. You're looking for advice and revisions to a superheroism employment contract?
Mm-hmm.
Swarm had looked over her own copy of the contract the night before and made a note of what she wanted, but didn't know how to integrate the condition correctly. Her hope was that Mr. Exter would be able to slip it in and explain how the whole legal system surrounding superism worked in practice. Her own knowledge was broad, general, and mostly theoretical. A deeper understanding had been reserved for a few relevant points of historical legislation and specific clauses in state law.
"I'm new to this."
You're a homegrown?
"Yeah. Accident."
Except Prince Snow's words from the park came back to her, and she rethought the statement.
"No. A gift. Nanotech."
Interesting. Can I see? She stomped down her instinctive refusal and let her hand come to rest over the hem of her cloak, out of sight of the camera. A square inch of the faux fabric disintegrated under her palm, and she wrapped the bots in her fist before bringing it in view of the camera. No sense in giving away too many secrets, even with attorney-client privilege in play. She uncurled her hand to show off the bots. They hovered over her hand in a marble-sized cloud which bounced up and down. Mr. Exter made an impressed sound. The attention made her uncomfortable, so she didn't keep the tech visible long. Back in her fist and back to her cloak it went. You will have to get used to being admired. Superheroes often end up as celebrities. Not if she could help it.
"All of the information regarding my current capabilities has been filled out already. That's not the part I need help with."
He flipped through the papers on his desk. Must have printed the contract. About that, I noticed that section seemed a bit sparse. If your tech is that limited in what it can do, it's not a good idea to engage in combat with other supers.
"My predecessor was more versatile. I'll get stronger."
The full list is constructs and telepathic control thereof, heat generation, a taser function, flight through constructs, color manipulation of the bots, resistance to mind reading and mind control, a mental computer, enhanced proprioception, and enhanced vestibular sense. The technology also grants potential. What are the last two? She wrote with her finger on the ground. It was hidden behind her leg at an angle where the programmer would see it, but Mr. Exter wouldn't. Proprioception is your awareness of where your body is in space and its position. The vestibular sense is your awareness of your body's movement through space. Thanks, Sana wrote. She'd known about most of those, but a full list of the bot's abilities was incredibly useful. Having the definitions for what the bots had altered didn't hurt either. Mr. Exter did not look convinced. No getting stronger if you're dead.
"My main opponent needs me alive."
Or thought he did, but there was no point in quibbling over details.
"And there's time for me to learn more about how my predecessor used the bots. I'm not unprepared."
He scribbled something on the contract with a very nice fountain pen. Looking down didn't hide the displeased twist of his lips. You're an adult. I can't stop you, but I will say you better figure it out quick if you want to see your next birthday. So what did you want my advice for?
"The contract is good, but ideally I want a clause in there that says if an officer points a gun at me, much less shoots me, the deal's off. I'd prefer to keep the risk of friendly fire to a minimum, even with my,"
she waved at her suit,
"equipment. Is that possible?"
Doable. Most contracts like these have a similar section. I can draft something for you easily. Anything else?
"I'ma be honest, maybe please don't shoot me was about as far as I got in terms of what I need you to add."
We can do better than that. What kind of responsibilities are you looking at? Sana flipped through her superhuman situation notebook.
"I figured a consultant type sort of thing would be ideal. It'd involve training and restrict my freedom, but I'd have more credibility than if I dropped bad guys on the station's doorstep without any experience or rapport with the officers. I'm not interested in being a full cop, or reckless enough to go totally freelance, even with the clause in citizens' arrest laws regarding superheroes fighting supervillains.
Sonnet copied the relevant section down word for word. When any person or group of persons in possession of extranormal abilities or hazardous esoteric technologies directly threatens imminent harm to the public health or safety, or is causing such harm, any other person in possession of extranormal abilities or esoteric technology may act to protect public safety and may detain those who threaten harm or cause such harm, if doing so would not itself unreasonably increase the risk to health and safety. Such action shall not be subject to civil or criminal action, provided a reasonable person would have believed the aforesaid actions were necessary to protect the public safety. It was a needlessly fancy way to say supervillain or superweapon arrests were A-OK to leave to the friendly costume crazies, in her opinion. That said, she appreciated that the exception existed in her home state. It kept her actions during her first and second fights with Prince Snow safely in the realm of legality.
I don't plan on dealing with non-super criminals either. The local police force has that well in hand, and I don't want to step on any toes by butting in. That said, I'll show up at accident sites if it looks like my presence would come in handy, and skedaddle if I'm told to leave. That should give me a fair bit of leeway if my research is right.
It is. A ping from the programmer led to a screen capture of a web page that affirmed his statement.
Perfect. If the CPD wants my help dealing with non-supers, they can ask me directly and put that request in their records. I don't want to get dragged through the courts more than necessary.
Mr. Exter nodded sagely. Cuts into personal lives, something awful. Among other things, Sana could feel the delayed homework beginning to loom, and summer assignments were designed to be completed slowly by nature.
That just about covers my desired responsibility to the city. Punch supervillains in the face whenever they rear their ugly heads. Help with cleanup afterwards if I won't get cussed out for it. Or shot. Have I mentioned that I don't want to be shot yet?
Once or twice. You seem a bit preoccupied with it.
I'd prefer to avoid the recovery period. Plus, it indicates I'm doing a bad job. The local cops pointed guns at me during our first in-the-flesh encounter, which isn't giving me warm fuzzies either.
Is there a reason they did that? First impressions are critical in this business. Did they think you were a supervillain? He waved his hand at the camera. You look the part. It was probably a bad sign that 2 of the 3 people who'd seen her in the suit had made comments about its supervillainous design.
They shouldn't have. I made first contact before my debut fight. Sent them a flash drive.
The realization of how similar Jeremy's situation with the drive was to hers with the suit hit like a truck. She groaned and buried her face in her hands.
And I messed up. Heck, I'm gonna have to do some serious groveling. Why am I so dumb? Crud, this sucks.
Are you okay?
I know why they don't like me. I'm an idiot.
Most supers are. Will you be that stupid again?
Not in the same way.
Then you're already smarter than most. Did you do something that will have legal consequences?
Probably not. I don't think so anyway. It was sketchy, not illegal.
What did you do? Swarm looked away.
I don't want to talk about it.
Mr. Exter tapped his pen on the contract decisively and started writing. I can't help you with your interpersonal issues unless you tell me about them, so let's move on. What were you thinking of for a salary?
People get paid for this?
Mr. Exter sighed. He didn't stop writing. Yes, most people get paid to risk life and limb against beings who can warp the laws of nature. Hazard pay, if nothing else.
Huh. Why did I think it was a volunteer thing?
Marketing purposes, mostly. So, salary?
My city's broke, and I recently came into an inheritance. I could use some advice on how to deal with that, now that I think of it. Point being, I can do this pro bono, at least till the economy gets better.
He snorted. They're also altruistic when they start. Okay, I suggest you talk to your people before finalizing that. They might take issue with having you lead risky ops without compensating you. Swarm sensed that there was a story behind that particular piece of advice. She resisted the urge to dig for it. Now wasn't the time.
I'm going to go over the whole contract with them. They're the ones doing me a favor by taking me on, and they're already not fans. It wouldn't do any good if they resented the terms of my involvement on top of that.
His expression morphed into an approving, assessing gaze. Awfully humble of you. She shook her head.
It's practicality, not humility. I don't want to get consumed by this life. The fewer criminals I claim as mine, the less time I spend as sworn the superweapon, and the more time I spend doing what I love. They're senior to me and the key to my goals. She sighed. I'm no more special or important than anyone else. Having a superweapon doesn't give me the right to show up and start throwing my weight around. It's part of how I screwed up first contact.
Mr. Exeter shook his head, a smile pulling at the corners of his lips. You really are smarter than most. Now that we've established you have the ability to recognize your old mistakes, shall we set you up to make fresh new ones? His smile prompted her to give him one in return, and she pumped her fist. Yes! Attaboy. Now, for the biggest thing. The licensing system in your state's kind of a disaster because the percentage of homegrowns is the highest in the country. It makes it hard to keep track of people. With what you want, you'll have to go through your local police.
I was planning on doing that anyway.
Good. While we're on the topic of licenses, how do you want to deal with your registration to a federal team? She had her response for this ready to go.
I'm not academy trained, and my interests are purely local, so I'm not registering with the federal system. If a world-scale threat does show, I'm covering my home turf unless specifically requested, or I learn of a need to do something nobody else can. The feds can suck it, as far as I'm concerned. They didn't bother to protect my city even after the local cops issued a request for help.
The anger-tinted bitterness smeared over the back of her tongue and made her hands clench into fists.
I wouldn't be doing this if they had. I want nothing to do with them.
He tapped his chin. That's going to be tricky. The government doesn't like it when powerful people slip through their fingers. Poke your head up even once, and you'll be locked into a team contract so fast it'll make Jet Set look like a sloth. They won't need to look that hard, seeing how you have to register for the superhero subsection of the Selective Service Act.
I only got the tech recently. My current registration is for a non-super.
It also couldn't exist for another 3 years, but that was too much to tell.
I didn't know I had to update it.
You don't. You technically don't, but it's not a good look, legally speaking. Like regular selective service, you lose out on a lot of benefits and opportunities if you don't update. I might be able to defend you, but it'd be a lot of trouble, and it might not work.
Could I register my super ID and my civilian ID separately? Taking the date I became a super as my other birthday, there'd be no link between my identities.
He shook his head. No. Such a move would be illegal for more than one reason. Unless you suddenly split into two people, one hero and one civilian, which has happened. That was a stressful week. You constitute a singular entity, legally speaking. It'd be considered fraud. On top of that, if your civilian persona gets drafted and you get outed as a super, nobody will be happy. The Federal Super Bureau is especially going to have a snit. They're already going to do everything in their power to get you under them. Doing that would make the situation worse.
Not if they don't find me. Trust me, they won't.
They will, he declared. They've got psychics, technopaths, more money than you could possibly hope to compete with, and enough supers under their control to grab you and yank the mask off if all else fails. You won't be able to keep yourself hidden forever.
But I have something more powerful than all of that on my side. Apathy.
She leaned in, tapping a finger on the laptop with every word.
They don't care about me and mine. They didn't come when a locally infamous super died, and they didn't come when my home was being torn to the ground. If they come to find me, a super protecting people, not attacking them, they're proving that their goals aren't about defending innocence. They want control more. Not a good look for supposed public defenders.
That won't stop them. Do not worry. Even if you are bound to a team, you have the choice to void the contract at any time until you turn 18. To do so, you would have to reveal your age and deal with the associated sacrifices. Minors are not considered legally competent to sign such contracts here. You could escape this contract in the same manner. She hadn't known that she could get out of something like that so quickly, but it wasn't an option regardless. Telling a police officer or another superhero she was a teenager would mean losing Swarm, leaving her family in Calabria high and dry. No dice.
If they want to catch me, I dare them to try. It'll get ugly fast. I'm a vicious son of a biscuit when crossed.
It wasn't necessarily true, but Mr. Exeter didn't need to know that. Not when the guy was in contact with other supers and would probably talk about her at least a bit. He raised one eyebrow. Son of a biscuit?
Listen, I'm trying to stay a halfway decent role model for kids. If that means swearing off swearing, then so be it.
A smile crossed his face at her joke. Good man. Positive PR goes a long way, especially with how you look and your rough start. Regardless, you still have to register if you're going to be a hero. All the good press in the world won't get you out of it. There had to be a way to stay compliant and keep herself safe.
What's the bare minimum of information I can supply and still be registered in the system?
Let's see, it's been a while. He typed something while talking, clearly speaking to fill the air. I've been getting more breakaways than homegrowns recently, and most homegrowns tend to get run down by someone more experienced and have their legal situation explained before I get called in. You're quite the anomaly. Swarm didn't respond. They lapsed into silence for a moment before Mr. Exter found what he was looking for. You're out of luck, she sagged.
I need to put my name down, don't I?
Social security number, actually. Along with that, it needs your super identity, a description of your powers, your birth date, and the date of your debut. She resisted the urge to curse.
Does it go with my selective service paperwork?
Correct. There aren't a lot of non-immortal superheroes outside of draft age, so the programs got lumped together. At least you could fill out the form online.
I don't like it.
It could be worse. This data can be linked to you, but anyone except the government's going to have a hard time. Plenty of other registration systems exist, and this is one of the lightest.
I find that hard to believe.
Believe it. You're not the first super whose paranoia has gotten in the way of federal compliance. Something like this means you exist in the system, which is better than having a bunch of superpowered draft dodgers running around without anyone knowing who exactly is doing so. It's not paranoia if they're really going to make you stop protecting your city as soon as your identity is uncovered, she thought dryly.
I'll deal with it after this meeting.
Mr. Exter frowned. Don't wait too long. If you keep everything hidden, nobody will be able to find and help you when you need support. You won't be accessible to other heroes who might need help either. That's not even touching on the legal consequences. Like they've been helping so far?
I don't trust the national government to care enough to keep my people safe, let alone me.
Don't trust them not to take me away. Fear not for your safety. I will hide and shelter you, and you will not be found. The programmer's confidence made something warm and fuzzy settle in her chest.
I have all I need and more right now. Why would I destroy myself by entering a bigger pond and bringing myself to the attention of bigger fish?
To protect more people, to do more good.
Yeah, no. I'm doing plenty of good right where I am. If a single other person had stepped up to protect this place, anyone at all, I would still be a civilian. It may not be Tokyo or NYC, but the people here deserve help too. I'm not playing the numbers game with that many lives on the line.
Just her own. All right. He clearly wasn't buying it. You know providing support or joining a team won't override your responsibilities to your city, right? And the database where they keep the secret identity info is the most secure place on the net. Could you break into it? Sana wrote. Yes. Do you want a demonstration? Why was he like this? No. She underlined the word several times.
I'm not taking that risk.
Please don't unless I ask. I will not. It's not paranoia if they're really capable of hacking into anything at the whims of a mostly random teenager, she thought, hysterically this time. Crisis averted for now, Sana focused all the way back on Mr. Exter.
I'll register in the selective service, but I'm not picking a team or making friends with anyone in the Super Bureau. That's final.
Okay, your funeral. He scribbled something else on the paper. So a lot of supers have... Hey, Toby, Leitmotif called. She wants a... Oh, are you busy? Yes, Jenna. Got a new guy here who needs an employment contract ASAP.
Hi,
Swarm chirped. She couldn't see the newcomer, but manners were manners.
Nice to meet you.
Mr. Exter sighed. Since she's already here, want to meet my team member?
You bet. I'll probably need her at some point, right?
He nodded. You'll definitely need this one, since you mentioned inheritance troubles. That's Jenna's specialty. She's the one who handles wills, trusts, and resurrection complications.
Busy lady. She have any open appointments soon?
The computer rotated to show a handsome blonde woman with a stern face and dark eyeshadow. Not for months. You people die about as easily as you come back. Speaking of, is there anyone you're worried about returning to haunt you, metaphorically speaking? It's nice to get a heads up with this stuff.
My predecessor's the only one I can think of. He might not want me dead. I don't know what he'd want for me, to tell you the truth. He didn't seem to resent me, but he was dying at the time. It's anyone's guess what he'd do to me if he came back.
Most likely she'd be safe until she hit 18, but after that, she wouldn't be shocked if he would kill her or worse to reclaim his property the day she was no longer protected by the self-imposed rules that governed her city's villains. Odds?
Low. I'm pretty sure he was cremated under a pseudonym.
Because James Crow, even that was the name he was buried under, she wasn't buying it as his real name.
He was a genius, so someone might want him for that. But there are plenty of more convenient geniuses out there. Unless we get another mass resurrection, he's staying in the dirt.
And that was a massive comfort, much as she hated to admit it. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Swarm. Good luck with your crime fighting.
Same to you. You know what I mean.
She laughed a little. It took 10 years off her face. I do. Mr. Exter turned the computer back around and made a shooing motion. Stop trying to steal my clients. I just got this one. Away with you! She laughed again over the sound of the door closing. Swarm said,
She was nice.
As soon as she was sure Jenna was gone. That's one word for it. As I was saying, a lot of supers take a secondary responsibility guarding the technology confiscated from the super weapons they defeat. You have a section here declaring your intentions to do so. Do you have the resources necessary to keep villains from reclaiming their weapons? Before Swarm could choke on a lie, the programmer stepped in. I can handle that. No one will get past me unless you want them to. Okay then. If you proved a danger, she could figure something else out.
Yes, part of the inheritance.
Sorry to diminish you like that. Do not apologize for protecting me and telling the truth. I can see why you'd want a legal expert's assistance then. Has the executor been helpful, at least?
Extremely. I couldn't have done any of this without them, but they're not a lawyer.
A terrifying thought crossed her mind. Are you? I cannot legally take the bar exam. I am otherwise qualified. Oh dear. Do I want to know? Not yet. Come find me. That didn't deserve a response, so she tuned back into the conversation with Mr. Exter. He said, Try not to do too much with the inheritance until Jenna squeezes you in. Do you have the will? Ding! She did now.
Yes.
Okay. I suggest you read it thoroughly and come with questions. Try and get in contact with the relatives of the deceased if you can.
He tried to kill me the first time we met.
Strike that. Avoid him.
He then almost murdered a whole bunch of innocent people to get my attention. Once he got it, he mutilated me.
At his expression, she shrugged.
I got better, but I'm not inclined to make nice with him after that.
I can see why. Might I suggest you find a therapist? For yourself, not him. That sounds traumatizing. If Sana had any sort of handle on the programmer's personality, he'd get her one soon whether she wanted it or not.
It's a work in progress. I need one I can see well in costume. Those are thin on the ground here. I'll probably need to do telehealth.
I'm sure you'll find one soon. Just don't give up if the first couple don't work out. Any final requests?
I want permission to ride on top of police vehicles during chases, and to run rooftops and perch on fountains and statues. Just because.
Mr. Exter rolled his eyes. You have no idea how many of you jokers have cracked their skulls with crazy stunts like that. The information popped up without her input, and she resisted the urge to sigh. The data wasn't relevant, though she appreciated his providing it.
I can secure myself. The odds that I'll have to do such a thing are low anyway. My predecessor could fly.
And why on earth do you want this? He sounded exhausted. Swarm had to smile.
Call it a precaution. Plus, it looks really fun.
You know what? Fine. I'll leave it to your people to explain why it's such a bad idea. Done. Want to add any other ways to kill yourself?
No, I think that covers everything. Thank you for all your help.
Just doing my job. I'll send you the updated copy of the contract by the end of the week. It was nice to meet you, Swarm. I look forward to seeing what you can do. Feel free to set up another appointment if you run into any legal trouble. And for God's sake, at least think about therapy. She would.
A therapist is next on my list. See you around, Mr. Exter.
She hit the end call button and watched the screen go black.
Got all that, Mom and Dad?
Loud and clear, her dad said. How are you planning to handle the selective service registration? Good question. She bit her lip.
I'll think of something before people get suspicious.
I have a solution. All you have to do is ask. Did she trust him with something so important? No. No, she didn't. Remind me if I don't have any better ideas in 6 months.
Noted.
That wasn't the only thing that needed handling, Mo.
My last communication was a disaster and a half. Any thoughts on how I can send the contract to the cops?
Her parents immediately started talking to each other, and Sana glanced back at her text history. Asking the programmer to secure her identity was one thing, but could she let him do this for her? It was a small thing to ask, and he'd given her so much already for no gain she could see. She couldn't picture him refusing. And yet, if she started asking, started relying on him, she wasn't sure she'd be able to stop.
She closed her eyes, weighed the pros and cons, and made her choice.